What's going on, everybody? We are now, I think, about a month and a half into my ownership of the T7. Check my mileage. I think we're coming up on somewhere around 800. 736 miles. I did go ahead and do the first oil change service. Pretty easy. You do have to take the skid pan off, but I won't get into too much of the stuff that a million people have put videos on, but I wanted to get out a really brutally honest, non-biased review of this bike, because there's some people that kind of just fall all over themselves for these motorcycles, and there's some people that just dog them. And I wanted to get this video out and really talk about what I think and just a background. I've been a motorcycle rider most of my life. I am not a hardcore off-road guy, but I have ridden off-road a lot. I'm not a racer, but I have ridden thousands and thousands of miles on motorcycles. So I feel like I'm a little bit honest, and I can tell you guys what this is really like. And I do live off-road, so I don't know if you can tell, I live on a rural county road. It's 3-4 miles in any direction to even get to a really bad paved road. So I do know what it's like to ride these bikes off-road. So I did make a quick kind of synopsis of what I really think about the bike. I'm going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, and a couple of things that I've changed so far, maybe what I'm going to change. Now, I'm going to get into some modifications over the winter, and I'll put these on here. I'll put a video together once I figure out what I'm going to do. But to start out, guys, the engine's great. There's people out there that say the engine is not powerful enough, and that's just not true. If you buy this bike wanting it to be a 120 horsepower motorcycle that just snatches your neck back on the highway, this is not it. This bike's not going to do that. I will say that it has more than enough power to, get up to 100 miles an hour on the highway. It can easily sustain 75, 80, even 85 on the highway. It will run anywhere in the United States on the open road and do it well. I mean, again, this bike's still got 70 plus horsepower. It's plenty of power for the weight. It's just not a crotch rocket. I mean, you got to understand that when you buy these things, right? So, also the suspension. I'm currently like 220 pounds, which is probably 15 pounds heavier than I really should be, which is way more than what they say this bike is set up for. I've ridden this thing on off-road, just goat trails. I've ridden it on gravel roads. I've ridden it on highway. I've ridden it on really bad city streets with big potholes. I've went over some small logs laying on, well, I say log, some limbs and things on the trails. I've ridden in rutted out off-road kind of gravel situations, and I've ridden it a couple 100 miles in one day on the road. Zero issues, guys. If you're going to be Tenere or somebody like that and you're going to do hard enduro, this isn't the motorcycle for you. Go buy a dual sport. Go get a KTM or something like that. That's not what this is. And we need to be honest about that. I think people get a little carried away. Comfort, another thing. I love the seat. I come from a lot of sport bikes in my life. I've had some Harleys and other things, you name it, but I know what an uncomfortable seat feels like. And guys, this ain't it. Now, if you're gonna ride 500 miles in a day on this bike, one, I would say it's probably not the bike for you, especially if you're just gonna burn up the street. If you're gonna ride cross country on the highway, get a different bike. That's not what this is for. You can do it. I rode 245 miles all highway not too long ago, with the exception of getting to and from the pavement from my house, but it was well over 200 plus miles in one day. My butt got a little sore, but I've ridden them all, even Harleys too. You get into that 200-300 mile range, I don't care what you're riding, your hands, your shoulders, your back, your butt is all going to start to get a little sore, especially if you don't ride a lot. So again, seat is fine. It's great for what this bike was intended for, which is a true 50-50 bike. I would even say this bike may even be 60 off-road, 40 on-road. But it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. I know people have said that before. You can do it all. Moving from there, the looks. I know they're subjective, but guys, this thing looks amazing. I don't care what color it's in. I don't care what modifications they've done to it. From any angle, the thing looks like a desert race bike from the 90s or 80s. It to me, there isn't a better looking bike out there. Honestly, the Ducati Desert X and the CF Moto 450 that is coming out are the only things that I would say that are close. I don't really like the way the KTMs look. I think the BMWs look ridiculous. The new Suzuki's okay. The Africa Twin's okay. Transalp looks like a street bike. They tried to make a dirt bike. I don't care how it performs. It just doesn't look like this. Now, again, subjective. This is my thoughts, but I am a Yamaha guy, and I do like this bike, and I own it. So you can say I'm biased. It's fine. We talked about the shock setup. People are messing with the shock settings. Again, suspension settings. I'm 220. I do a little bit of everything except for hardcore off-road riding. I didn't touch it. It seems fine for me right now. As I get more used to it and I take it more off-road, I may change some things, but I'm not going to touch the bike as far as how the suspension is set up. Now, with all of that said, I'm going to talk about some things that I don't like. The throttle. This throttle is twitchy. When you're, it being tall, it's twitchy and it's a little weird to get used to. I'm used to fly-by-wire bikes with the exception of my old dirt bikes and things like that, but this bike's throttle is twitchy once your initial takeoff is twitchy. Outside of that, it's fantastic, but it isn't right. There's something in the programming of that throttle body that is just really aggressive when you first get on it, and I would sling gravel a little bit every time I took off on it when I first got it. I have gotten a little used to it, but I still notice it, and it may go away. I may forget about it after a while, but when you first buy this bike, it is twitchy. The shifting, I will admit, after the first oil change, the shifting got a lot better, and Yamaha is not the Hondas of the world. They never had the most smooth shifting transmissions, but they were good transmissions. And don't get me wrong, this one's fine. It's a good shifting transmission. But with that original break-in oil, it was bad notchy. I'm not sure what that was all about. After I changed the oil, most of that went away. I think it's about true Yamaha fashion now, but it was bad notchy, especially out on the highway. If you weren't ringing it out, if you were just shifting it normally, it was too notchy for me. It had something to do with that break-in oil, I think. Pegs. If you're gonna sit down and ride this bike up and down the highway, the pegs are fine. But I think Yamaha should have made them bigger. I took the rubber inserts out and threw them away. There's no need in them being in there. Again, if you're gonna use this bike as a cross-country tour and run down the interstate all day long, leave the rubber in there. But if you're gonna stand up and ride it off-road at all, throw those away, and I would advise going ahead and getting some pegs. I'm probably going to buy the Camel ADV pegs. I like those for the price. I would try the nice CNC pegs, but for some reason I'm having a hard time pulling the trigger on a known Chinese product. I haven't heard of any of them breaking or anything, but a foot peg is one of those things that you don't want to find out that they will break, right? That's just, you can handle some bling being from China, but you break a foot peg coming off of a bump or something like that while you're riding, that could be a really bad day. That $50 you saved on the Chinese foot peg could cost you way more than that in damage when you bust your ass. So the only other thing I'll talk about a little bit is the clutch. I know there's some recalls and things coming about, and I haven't researched that very much, but the clutch lurches. If you crank it in gear, especially when it's cold, it kind of lurches a little bit. It's not enough to be a safety issue for me, but I do notice it and I don't like it. So I'm going to talk to my dealership and see if this bike falls into that clutch recall. It did get a little better when I changed the oil, but something's going on there. I've adjusted the clutch a little bit and I've got it to where it feels right, taking off, but it still does that lurch. I'm not crazy about it. Now the power, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here and talk about the power on the engine. As I said, I like the engine. It's great. Sounds great. Smooth. Everything about it's fantastic. Now, I will say that they could have easily gotten 10 horsepower more out of this bike. Why they don't do it, I don't know. It may be because it's so good off-road the way it is, they leave it alone. But for a 700cc parallel twin, they could have popped it up another 10 horsepower at least. And I think that 10 to maybe 15 horsepower increase on the engine would give people what they're looking for out on the highway. You know, get it into that 90 range, then you're going to be in the KTM realm, maybe even the Ducati realm with that power number, and people wouldn't complain about it. What I think they did was detune this bike just enough to get dead nuts reliability out of it and the smoothness. I have no doubt Yamaha can make that 100 horsepower engine. I just don't think they wanted to, because they don't want to have the problems that come along with having a high performance engine like that. And that's more of a Honda thing. But given that they built this bike and designed this bike to get on it and haul ass off-road all day long, you don't want to have to worry about camshafts and oil consumption and vibration and all that other stuff you get with some of these other brands. I mean, KTM, outside of them going bankrupt, they have a really bad eyesore with those camshafts and stuff. Everybody's talking about them. And if you want a bike like this to go camping or long distance traveling on, you don't have to worry about your bike breaking down. And you can't not worry if you're riding a BMW. I'm sorry. It's just what it is. Last thing, no fly-by-wire. All right. I understand why people wanted the cable. It's supposedly easy to fix. You're not going to have any problems with it. But guys, you don't have problems with electronic throttles. I've never heard of anybody realistically having a problem with an electronic throttle. Now, feel off-road, people can argue that if they want to. I'm not that guy. And I understand that the new one, the 2025, is supposed to have fly-by-wire, which means they're going to be able to put cruise on it relatively easy. But damn, guys, put the fly-by-wire on the motorcycles and put cruise on it. That was my biggest reason not buying this bike earlier. I had the XRS 900, but it just didn't work for me. I went ahead and bought this bike anyway. Put cruise control on your motorcycles. I don't want to hear this, well, we saved that for the upper model. Put cruise control on the bike. It's ridiculous. People that ride these to work like I do, I've got a 120-mile commute. Having cruise control is just really nice. All right, that's it on the pros and cons. To wrap all of that up, bike's awesome, guys. I can't really say anything else about it as far as longevity and things like that. And I apologize for my sniffly nose. The whole family's sick again. It seems like every time I do a video we're sick, but the bike does what it's supposed to do. It looks great, rides great, it's got plenty of power. It's going to do what you want it to do if you are honest about what you're buying when you buy it. I mean, for 10 grand, I got a rebate on this one. It brought the price down to like $9,970. It's a great buy. It leaves you a lot of room for customization. The aftermarket is going to be, you know, booming forever on these motorcycles, so you can about do whatever you want to with it. I think you could get this thing tuned with an intake and exhaust modification and probably easily get this bike up to 80 horsepower. I would think an 80 rear wheel horsepower number could be reached. I'm not sure about that, but I know you could probably get 70 rear wheel horsepower pretty easily. So, all right, really fast, I'll talk about the little bit of modifications I've done to it. The only thing I've done was added the alt rider rack. I looked at the Camel and I didn't have a problem with drilling through the plastic, but that rack just did not have a lot of structural integrity if I decided to put something heavy on the back of this thing. I just didn't like exactly the way that it was designed. It looked great, and they're honest about it. They say not to put heavy weight on it, but this is just a better design. Now, what I also did was I looked at the tail eliminators all over the internet forever, and I ended up buying this cheap one on Amazon. It had a nice LED light. It held, it retained the factory blinkers, and it looked good. So I bought them both at the same time. They came in, and I quickly realized, if you look right here, there's no clearance between that blinker post and the bottom of that alt rider rack. And I can tell you right now that will not work. I modified this one, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but it will not work. The Amazon tail eliminators will not work with that alt rider. The alt rider has these brackets on each side, a support bracket, which is fantastic. That was a really good design. And then you have your top rack, which is aluminum, to save a little bit of weight. Very, very sturdy. I actually use this to push the bike around with. Now, they originally designed this thing to bolt up underneath the tidy tail. It wouldn't do that because I had no clearance, right? Well, it also wouldn't work if you mount the tidy tail. Let's see if I can get that in there. I have the tidy tail mounted underneath the alt-rider brackets, which is not the way it should be done. Now, that being said, there's nothing wrong with the way I did it. I did have to Dremel and modify. I don't think I'm going to be able to catch this on camera, but I cut some material away to allow this to fit. I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but you know, it can be done if you got a little mechanical knowledge and a Dremel. You can cut it and make it look fine. I painted it so it's really hard to see, but I made it work. And the only thing that I think it did, if you look right there, even, that is designed to kind of hug the seat and make it, see if that makes more sense. Well, hell, now that I look at it, there's a gap there. I think they designed this to be exactly even with the rear seat, and the modifications I did put less than a 1/4 of an inch higher here. Makes no difference. It worked out perfectly. Now I have a very, very strong supported rack back there, and I have a $40 tidy tail instead of a $140 tidy tail. Everything worked out great. The little LED light on the tag works really good. I didn't have to cut any wires. Everything plugged in, and it looks good. The video's getting a little long, so I'll wrap this up. I think I'm gonna do some kind of hand guards, bark busters, something. I'm gonna get rid of those because those are a wind jammer. They're not really gonna help you if you hit yourself on a tree or a limb. I'm gonna do a high fender kit. There's one on eBay where it gives you the high fender and retains this one back here, so you don't have to relocate your brake lines and things. I'd buy the Camel one, but they don't give you a front fender, and for that price point they have, I think they should. So I'm probably gonna get away with that again. I'm gonna do most likely the Camel ADV pegs. I think I'm going to do some mirrors, but those, honestly, I probably should have talked about this earlier. The mirrors are fine. I don't like the way they are off-road because I hit my hand on them when I'm trying to get my hands back on the handlebars. I am going to do the Camel ADV rear brake. The brake feels pretty mushy. It isn't very great. It's fine, but if you try to lock the back brake up, it is a little mushy. So I'm going to do that. I will get some kind of skid plate. I'm hung up on what to buy. There's about 4 of them that I like, so it'll be a while before I make a decision on that. And let's see. Oh yeah, Camel ADV exhaust. I really like the way they designed that. Somebody's like, oh, you're going to cut your frame. Yep, I am. I'm going to do the deal where it hacks that off and mounts the exhaust up high. I don't care about that, so I'm going to do it. It's better to do that than to break it later because this bike will be on the ground at some point. And that's probably about it. I'm going to leave that stock seat alone. If I go to anything else, it'll probably be the seat concept seat. And I may do about a 2-inch higher windshield. I found on the highway that I started kind of lurking down a little bit to get the wind over my head. I think 1.5 inches, 2 inches there will help. I don't think it needs to be any wider. I didn't talk about the height of the bike. It's a tall bike. It's top heavy. I'm not going to get into that. There's a million people talking about it, but I'm 5'9", 5'10". I've got about a 31-inch inseam, 32 maybe. With a good pair of boots on, I can ride this bike fine. Now, with that being said, I'm pretty strong, and I've been riding a long time. If you're on the 5'7", 5'8", or lower, and you don't have very strong legs and you're not an experienced rider, this bike's going to give you problems. It will. Moving around, it's fine, but like backing it out of driveways and things like that, or parking lots, or taking off, or just moving it with it not running is a problem. Be careful. It wouldn't hurt for you to go to a dealership and sit on it and move it around in the showroom or whatever before you actually buy this thing. It may not be for you. It is heavy up top, and people can say what they want. It just is what it is. The bike is gonna be troublesome for people that are short. All right, guys, I got a little long-winded, but I wanted to get all that out. I really like talking to you guys online. My channel doesn't have a lot of flow, so I don't get to talk to a lot of people, but I'm hoping that maybe eventually some Tenere riders will see this video, and it just allows me to talk to you guys. I really enjoy that. But that's it, guys. I appreciate it. If you got any questions for me, let me know, and hope to hear from you. Thank you.